welcome to the Out of the Trance podcast. I'm your host, Andrea DeBellis, and today I am here with Emma Harmsen.
Hi.
Emma is a licensed psychologist, an EMDR therapist, a mindfulness coach, a couples coach, and now she is doing psychedelic-assisted therapy, which I'm so excited to talk to her about today. So Emma, welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here. So I want to just start by talking a little bit about your background and the work that you've been doing and what brought you to the psychedelic-assisted therapy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm starting to feel at home here in this studio. So I've been a psychologist for over 15 years. And as you grow as a person, I also grow as a psychologist, which means that along the way I started doing different kinds of therapy modalities. So I started more in the research setting, and then I slowly moved into more clinical therapy, like one-on-one, and then even group therapy and also couples therapy. And I think as I started to develop myself, because for me it's, I think my personal and professional career, or interests are intertwined. Yeah. I think you as a therapist would know that, you also have to do the work yourself.
Indeed.
So I think the whole psychedelic-assisted therapy came into mind more as a personal interest. So it was like, I think from a personal development point of view, and also curiosity, I started looking into psychedelics as a tool for personal development myself. So I was never really an adolescent or a student that used drugs. So for me, it was more, it was really something that I felt like, hey, is this something that could bring me as a person to another level, to a deeper level? And I think all of us human beings, we have things to work on, right? Mm-hmm. We all have our patterns and our wounds, and so as do I. So, I think for me, at a certain point, I was really, in a way, called, because this is what people say when they use ayahuasca, is that you need to have sort of a calling towards the plant medicine. And I did 2 ayahuasca ceremonies, and then actually after those ceremonies, I realized this is such a profound tool to go deeper into yourself and like your your behavior, your patterns, your wounds. You could call them traumas. I think they're exposed in a different way than when you would do talk therapy. Sure. Or somatic therapy, and it's so for me, after those ceremonies, I really started looking more into hey, this could be something for me that I could use in a professional level, not ayahuasca, but psychedelics in general. So then I started researching that, and at a certain point, I did a psilocybin ceremony, so with mushrooms, with a psychologist, actually, with a therapist. He guided me, and during that ceremony, I had a very clear sort of insight, okay, this is what I should do. And this is actually why I'm here. This is what it really felt like that.
Wow.
Yeah. And also, this is the reason why I'm a psychologist. So after that ceremony, I don't know. It's never really a coincidence, I would say, but I found this 1-year intensive study in the US, because I'm very much myself. I'm very much a sucker for knowledge and education. So I did this 1-year study and was amazing. Literally, the first sort of lecture that I had was like, oh yeah, this is.
You knew you were in the right place.
Yeah, I knew I was in the right place. I was like, this is amazing. And then I started working with psilocybin from that point. This study actually was also on ketamine and MDMA therapy.
The course you did.
Yeah, the course.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So it was on psilocybin, ketamine, and MDMA. And in this particular moment, like ketamine is legal, but it's even more a clinical setting because you would need a doctor or a nurse,
really?
to prescribe it and also actually to administer it because it's with an injection or an IV.
Oh,
yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah, so I'm not doing that at the moment. MDMA therapy I would love to start, but this is for now it's not legal yet. But now in the US, actually, the FDA is approving MDMA. Will approve MDMA this year for therapy.
Okay.
Yeah. So and then it's going to be related to post-traumatic stress syndrome, because they do a lot of research on PTSD combined with MDMA, and it's amazing results. So for me, this is something that I also would love to start when it's going to be legal here in Europe. So yeah, and even for couples therapy, it's an amazing tool. But
I've heard that, and I can imagine as a recreational of MDMA in the past that it is very good for couples therapy or even any sort of interpersonal relationship.
Yeah, it's like they say it's a heart-opening drugs. Medicine actually. In the end, it's also in a way a medicine. And it's really what it does. Actually, it lowers your fear response in your brain. Yeah, in your brain and in your body. So that's why for post-traumatic stress disorder, it's a very profound tool because as people let's say a war veteran, because they use this now for war veterans in the US who have severe PTSD and have tried like lots of other therapies. And what they see is even after 1 or 2 of those MDMA sessions, which take like 8 hours, it's insane. The results are insane. It's like before those sessions, they had no life, let's say, they were so impaired on a daily basis, and afterwards they say I have my life back after even 20 years of PTSD symptoms. Wow. And what it does, during this therapy, so when you ingest MDMA, it lowers your fear response. So what they do during this therapy, they start talking about their traumas. Without this intense fear mechanism coming up. So they really can go deep to the root and the root cause instead of staying focused on the symptoms, usually a lot of physical symptoms with post-traumatic stress disorder, but also mental symptoms. So, and this is something that is really, it's amazing. And also, so in couples therapy, it would work in a way that, when you're with your partner and, I think everyone can relate to that. We all have our defense mechanisms.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you're criticized or, when there's a trigger and you feel like, then it's really hard to stay connected with your partner and stay in this communication, in the constructive communication. And with MDMA, you notice that also because this is usually also fear, right? I'm not good enough, or I did something wrong, or and also with MDMA, you will notice that this fear response also lowers, so that you can really be more connected to the other person and really listening to the other person and acknowledging maybe where, what they're saying or what is your part or your share in this, in the issue.
Yeah.
without going into that
old protective pattern, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what generally trips us up is
Yeah.
that these unconscious patterns that were set up at some point in life to protect us, and maybe they were useful at one point, or we thought they were useful, but they're not anymore. And then they're usually probably coming from like parental relationships, and then we find ourselves in a loving relationship a marriage or couple as an adult, and they just come up. And I can imagine when you like take something like MDMA and bring the armor down, they don't get in the way of the communication anymore. And I also can imagine the same way with PTSD, because a lot of times if you have the trauma that is kind of like a guard around the feelings, you're not actually in touch with the feelings that are underneath the protective state around the trauma. So I remember from, again, when I did it recreationally, you're so in touch with your feelings in a way that you feel things that you don't even know you felt. And most of them feel loving and good, right? It's really hard. I've never seen anyone in like a bad mood or a bad trip on MDMA.
No, me neither. Yeah, no, it's exactly what you're saying. It's exactly that mechanism that that you can really go to the deeper, the underlying patterns and change those instead of like staying focused on the shield.
Right.
Yeah, on the protective mechanisms that you have. Yeah.
And chemically, like, is it working with just your serotonin? I remember, or is it oxytocin? Does that come in? How does that work with MDMA?
Yeah, with MDMA, it's a bit different, and I'm not really like I've actually studied this, but it's for now I'm more focused on the psilocybin.
Yeah.
So, but MDMA, what it does, it literally there's this fear response. Which is also a part is in your amygdala, which is like the center where you have the emotional responses. So fear is there, and it actually what it does it lowers the activity in the amygdala.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So this is a very short version of what it does, but this is actually a sort of what they say what it does. Yeah.
Which is very powerful because the amygdala response usually kind of, a lot of us are working with like the limitations of like our grandparents or their parents, right? They're like these old sort of kind of patterns and generational traumas around survival, and we're still working with them because the brain is trained to do those. So if you can just stop it for a minute.
Just stop it.
Stop it. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Fascinating, really.
Yeah.
I actually shied a little bit away from MDMA. I had a friend who had a very good experience with it, actually around depression and trauma. And she was talking to me about it, and I was interested. She had this guy that was facilitating when I was living in Australia, and I thought about doing it. But I when I was in college taking it recreationally, I found that, again, I was buying street drugs, and I have no idea what was in them. And but my experience was that like afterwards I would have this come down for like 2 days that like I couldn't even watch the news because I found it like so, I was still had so much empathy that it was really, it was kind of a come down. So I'm still, I was a little bit afraid of doing that, but I don't know if the quality that you'd be using now.
So this is actually a lot of people ask me because people that use recreational drugs, and specifically after ecstasy, which ecstasy has like speed and MDMA, like MDMA is in the ecstasy, so that's why you also experience like the connection, and the speed makes you like, be able to stay up all night. But it's actually usually what they say is like the Tuesday dip or whatever comes because your dopamine gets like drained.
Yeah.
This usually comes from speed.
Okay.
But with MDMA itself, it happens less, let's say, but it can still happen. And then you also have like some supplements, but I don't know which ones actually now, but which you can take, which actually prevent but like natural supplements which prevent a bit the dip. But I think in general, when you would use it in a therapeutic setting, right? Because that's where I would use it, you would need to know that it's pure MDMA.
You wouldn't be in the parking lot of a Travelodge.
No, and I think when they start legalizing it, it's going to be... I mean, they are not sure what would be the model, but like I think it would be something like literally going to a pharmacy and so someone prescribing it, someone that's licensed, and obviously prescribing it to a client that has a diagnosis. So this is still how it would work. And then the pharmacy would make it. So then it's like literally as if you
know what you're getting.
Get your prescription drugs. Yeah, literally.
Yeah, very different
experience. And then you would take it to your psychologist or psychiatrist, and then you would do the session. Or the therapist, like the psychologist, would go to the pharmacy themselves and like...
They would have like a distributor.
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
So this is how it would work when they start legalizing it.
Very interesting. Yeah. And so would it be similar to? Well, I want to talk about more the psilocybin that you work with. But would you do a session of MDMA and then do the therapy while you're on MDMA, or you would do it in an integration afterwards?
Yeah, actually, that's also an interesting part, because this is also would be a bit different from the psilocybin therapy, because psilocybin really draws you inward.
Yeah.
And you would also, like the setting would look like that you would have like eye shades and headphones with music playing. So the idea is really to draw your senses inwards, to have really an inward journey. So usually during those 4 to 6 hours, some people start talking, but like it's more like talking, and then I would help them go back to their inner healer.
Yeah.
Because this is actually the idea. And with MDMA, it's less of an inward process. It's like literally something that opens you up.
Yeah.
So the therapy is during those like 8 hours. There's a lot of talking, and you would really... It's also connecting someone to their inner healer, but you would like deliberately move someone towards their trauma, like either a one-time event or like, it depends on what is the issue. And then you would really talk with them through the trauma or the traumas during the session. But you also do preparation and integration anyway.
Okay.
So there's always an integration between the sessions. With psilocybin, it's the preparation, the session, the day itself, and then the integration sessions afterwards. And during the integration, actually, you start talking more about the journey, and then you start connecting it to their intention, or like whatever the reason is that they came to do this, and what are the insights, and how they can translate this to their daily life as well. So I think that's the difference between the substances, let's say.
It's quite a different substance, and what you're saying makes sense, because again, with my MDMA experience, it was very outward. It was very, you liked being around people, not too many, but around people. And then with psilocybin, more getting messages, aren't you? It's less of you're getting, as you said, messages from your inner healer, but you're getting a lot of insights like the one that you had when you did it. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. So you had your experience after you initially felt called to ayahuasca. I do want to ask you, what does the calling feel like to ayahuasca? Yeah. I've heard of this. I thought I was called. Turns out I wasn't. The shaman was like, you're not. But what is the calling? How do you know?
That's a nice question, actually, because I don't know if I really thought about it like that, in a way, like how do you know? But let's say for me, I think it started, my husband, he's a very curious person. He's really the person that once, he feels like I want to do this, and he experiences something. Like I also like to experience something, but I'm usually more like, beforehand I start thinking about it or feeling and like, and then I at some point choose if I want to do something or not. He learns more by like doing it, and then he would like, oh, okay, this was interesting and this was not interesting, let's say. So he got this sort of call first in a way. I don't really know like when this started. So he did a few ayahuasca ceremonies, and I think because of him, I started. It started to become a bit more vivid, a bit more alive inside of me. But still, I was feeling like, okay, it could be interesting, But I just now I know about it. I know someone close to me that has experienced certain things, and then I think 1 year later. It was kind of all of a sudden I felt like, okay, now it's time. Yeah, it's just
you just knew.
It's like more an intuitive thing, I feel, in terms of, I'm a bit excited and a bit anxious, obviously, because it's kind of it's not like it's a fun trip to whatever. It's like, okay, I have to sort of face some things probably that could come up, and but I think I also made this decision, and then I was, I already knew of an organization that I wanted to do it with, and it was also like usually they're really full and everything, but it was like all of a sudden, okay, yeah, it's September, and like in November we still have a spot, Then I also felt like, okay, it should be like this. So yeah, I just booked my flight and I went. And I also felt when I was driving there, I thought like, okay, yeah, I really feel, excited, but not like, this is what I was checking in with. For me, it was important beforehand that I was thinking like, what kind of fear mechanisms are starting to come up when I think about this? And
yeah, that makes sense.
Is it like sort of which kind of excitement or I call it anxiety, but it was not really, but like just this sort of excitement, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, is it just excitement because it's something unknown, like something that you're like, oh, I'm curious what it's gonna bring, or is it like
dread or something?
Yeah, fear. And then I would like, I think for me that was an important thing because it was like more sort of deeper fear. Then I wouldn't do it at that moment, but it was more like the other, I don't know, excitement.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So for me, it was like, that was the calling in a way.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then you had the psilocybin ceremony and you had the insights that this is what you're meant to do.
Yeah. So after the ayahuasca, so you have to see that before that I was not a recreational drug user. So a lot of my friends were like, oh my God, what is she going to do? You're going to do ayahuasca? Like,
oh, it surprised people.
Yeah, it surprised people in a way because, but not from the point of view that I was like drawn to it, because it was like, they were like, okay, yeah, obviously she's drawn to like personal development and like, so, okay, we understand like the angle.
You're a researcher.
Yeah.
It's research.
Yeah, it's research. Yep. And it's also, I like to try things that are, I don't know, that I feel make me grow in a way. So after that, after that it started, my sort of journey on a professional level started to come in after ayahuasca. And then I thought like, okay, I want to try different psychedelics, right? As a tool to grow. So then psilocybin was something that I really wanted to experience. And then I found a therapist because I really want to do it with someone, like with an experienced guide or like with ayahuasca. I would never it's those things, like for me it's really important to do it in the right setting.
Sure. Yeah. Set and setting.
And then and during that session I had like this clear insight, and I really saw like, okay, this is what I want to do with work. And also because ayahuasca is something for me that has it's like, I don't know, like with psilocybin I felt like, okay, this is also something that I can bring into practice in a way. Like it was a bit of a different
right. With ayahuasca it has a certain
it's a very indigenous practice, right? Yeah. And I mean, psilocybin as well. Let's say, like every plant medicine has a really strong ancient and indigenous practice, which is also a very delicate topic. But with psilocybin, I felt like, from my point of view as a psychologist, as a Westerner, I could use that for a therapeutic goal, and so that's why.
And you're Dutch, and it's legal there. So
this is not something that's quite important. True. Yeah.
So let's talk about how that works. So very different than the MDMA, where you do the kind of session when you're in the process. Mm-hmm. So with the psilocybin, how does that work?
Yeah, you mean like a session itself?
Or just like a process?
Yeah. So what I usually do is I have just a call with someone just to I have some questions that I ask. Also, is it are there any contraindications? So any reasons not to do it? Which are a few. For a woman, it's pregnancy, breastfeeding, although you could, but then you have to throw away your milk. And there are some general physical reasons not to do it, like heart conditions, very high blood pressure, because it elevates your blood pressure a bit. If you are taking like medicines, for example, epilepsy is not it's like something that you shouldn't, or at least check with your neurologist or your doctor. And there are some conditions which are mental, which are also contraindications. So people that have experienced a psychosis before, or have family members, first relative family members that have schizophrenia, and those things that's important to address immediately. And then afterwards, I just ask some questions. What is the reason that they want to do it? Like, what is their intention? And then we make an appointment for like a proper intake, like a preparation session. And this could be either one or two. Like, it's something that is really depends on what is like the purpose of this journey. So then after we have like a profound preparation, we plan the session, and this session itself is like a whole day, or at least like 4 to 6 hours, let's say. We don't talk a lot anymore because we've already talked beforehand.
Okay.
So it's really like about being there. I do like meditation with them, just to really focus on their intention, to focus on the mushroom, like the wisdom, and then they take the mushroom, they take psilocybin, and then it takes around like 4 to 6 hours, depending on how quick you metabolize it. And then we talk a bit, but I let them talk. Like, I don't do any therapeutical interventions or because it's like really about what's going on inside, like what is. And then after we do the integration, and integration is at least one session, but also depending on the person, like it's 2 or 3. Sometimes they stay for a longer therapy. Sometimes I integrate this therapy into like another form of therapy. For example, they come to me because they want to do EMDR, or like we already started talk therapy, and then they do the session. So then it's a bit easier to like integrate everything.
Yeah.
And some people come to me specifically for this, and then people come to me with a proper. So you have people that come to me that are just feeling like, okay, I don't have like any diagnosis or anything, but I really want to
try this.
Yeah, and I really want to work on myself because I have some things that I want to change. And until now, I tried several things, but I didn't change enough, or I want to experience this. But then you also have people who have like a diagnosis of depression, and then it's a bit of a longer process, because with people that are that are depressed, usually you don't do one psilocybin journey. You usually do a few.
Okay.
Yeah, and then between the sessions you do integration, like you do integration of the previous session, and then it's more like a package in a way.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool because, you know, I'm thinking about how this works with the session itself and, you know, the information you get. You get a lot of information, and as you said, you get in touch with your inner healer. When I think about how I work in hypnosis, I always do investigative processes before, and I do resource processes. So before we go and confront whatever the issue is somebody's coming in for, we want to get them the resources. So we have like the wise inner, the inner wisdom. And we personify that in different ways based on who I'm working with and their age and background and stuff. And then we do some investigation into like, you know, where this started. Yeah. And then we kind of do the work. But how useful to have... Is that good? Still closer? Yeah? Okay. Huh?
If we stop for a second, I'm going to fix it for you.
Oh.
Sorry.
No worries.
How useful, you said, like how useful it is.
So how useful, because you're, you know, it's obviously with hypnotherapy, you are using an altered state. You're working with brainwave states of theta or alpha sometimes, but you still are up against the critical factor and the ego, the mind, the personality. So to the extent that you can really dissolve that through psilocybin, which I've experienced, and I found it profound. I didn't have, I went in with an intention. I didn't have like a session. I didn't have it therapeutically. I had a trip sitter, which it's not the same, I know. And then I found that a lot of what I experienced was afterwards. So it was like there was a lot of insights, and maybe you can explain this a little bit more, but I felt like, so I did it because I needed to interrupt a pattern. I needed some insight around something that was a pattern that I just kept going through in my life, and a few of them. And in those two, I did two kind of sessions in a week. And after those sessions, I got a lot of insights, but it wasn't like, okay, you've now got the information to implement. It was more implementing itself for me. And I experienced this once when I did San Pedro.
Yeah.
The effect didn't come afterwards. It was subperceptual at the time, but then there was like this seamless integration. It wasn't like, oh, here's the info. Now this is what to do. It just happened.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think this is also what I tell people. Like, first of all, it's not like a magic pill, right? It's not like I swallow the pill and then... this happens and you get an insight, and then, you know, next day you're like, okay, everything changed. Yeah, no, but what I think is, for me, like the integration is actually maybe the most important part of the session. Well, preparation as well, but like the integration, because we are all, even though you're in this window of lowering like your default mode network, right? So your patterns become like, okay, maybe I see some other things, or okay, this is what what I need to do, or this, you know, you have some insights, but then, you know, a few days later, as you go back to your work or like in your relationship, or it's so easy for us to, I'm not saying close up, but like to go back into this, to the old...
They're pretty hardwired.
Yeah, they're very hardwired.
One way for a long time.
So you know, like it's also not like, okay, I do one psilocybin session or, you know, whatever, or one hypnotherapy session, and, you know, things are solved. I think it's the expectation of people about these kinds of therapies that are quite high, also after like Netflix series, you know, of How to Change Your Mind, like, so this is like the new... Yeah. But you still have to do the work yourself, you know? Yes. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't realize is that you still have to do the work. And I think it's easier, is what you said, like, you know, it's, I don't know, you sort of slowly go into it, or like I think it is easier in a way than when you're just focusing on like your rational, your conscious brain. And so you definitely open up something.
Yeah.
But it's also very important, like, how do I integrate this into my daily life? So I can have this insight, but I still have to change maybe something, my behavior, or, you know, even whatever, maybe in work. I really truly believe that you will get all the lessons that you need to learn. And this is something that you will receive your whole life, I think. Like it's also phases in our lives that we go to a certain point, or you think you peeled out all the layers of the onion, and then, you know, someone appears in your life, or, you know, as we get older, we enter in different life stages, which is normal. And I think during those stages, you will see, wait, okay, I got another lesson again, you know. And I think it's also realizing those things. I think with psychedelic-assisted therapy, or with psychedelics, that you become maybe even more aware of, like, okay, that's another of those trigger points, or like lessons, or something that I need to learn. Now I have the choice also to have a different response, right? Or to, instead of going left because it's the easy road, to think, I take a turn to the right.
Or proactively say, you know what, I want to learn something about myself, or I want to change something and get the information. Because I think that we get initiation trials. If we, you know, life will keep kind of presenting the same thing to us until we learn the lesson. And then we can learn it and move on. But if we don't do that, then we keep getting it again. And you can learn that way. Or you can say, okay, actually, I'm ready to proactively do this, right? So it's actually, you know, like, you're making the choice. And I think that, well, on this, I think it's an interesting thing, because when we talk about, like, you know, this has been an indigenous and ancient practice of a lot of cultures, and possibly the beginnings of most of our culture. Even esoteric Christianity has a lot of, there's a lot of proof and a lot of realization that, you know, even in ancient Rome and ancient Greece, they were using psilocybin. And there is also a lot of talk about, you know, how it is an initiation, how basically, like, at some point, you know, you grow up, right? And this is how you do it. And, you know, since at least the beginning of this century, right, you know, going back a few generations, life has become about survival. Religion has become external. Science has been just about the material. So we've been so focused on, you know, just the matter of things. And especially now, when we have, you know, when we approach things from the analytical mind and sort of the, you know, the heightened amygdala, state of survival, we're really not able to get to the next level. So it makes a lot of sense that you use something like this to help you actually do what probably is part of, you know, a lifetime, like a rite of passage that we probably have given up over the past several generations. That was really important, because that's how we that's how we break these patterns. That's how we used to kind of grow up, or get a bigger view on the world, or kind of change how we saw things. But now we're get so stuck in our patterns and neural pathways.
No, I agree. And I also think that we are so disconnected from nature, and we're not really living. I mean, I think we start to go back a bit. I mean, this is always the case. Like, there are people who are very disconnected and people who are more connected. But I think because we don't really live in this symbiosis anymore, I think we start to look for, because what I believe is, like, obviously we are nature, right? Like, so I think if you really disconnect from nature, you actually start disconnecting from yourself. And I think maybe the Western world starts, like, becoming more interested in let's say psychedelic or plant medicines, because we are looking for a way, I think, to connect more to ourselves and to nature, because actually also plant medicine literally connect you to nature, to the bigger part of where we live, and actually so it connects you to yourself, and we are nature, but it also really connects you to
real intelligence.
Yeah, and I think this is something for me. What if we talk about ancient and indigenous practices? What you were saying is like a rite of passage. I think in general, when you when you become this is like really ancient traditions that is like mother to daughter to son to and they really become initiated at a certain age, a younger age, and there's such profound and strong wisdom there.
Yes,
which they are. It's not like they are. I think they are that. It's not like it's like an. Yeah, because it's such a strong family tradition and such a strong thing that comes from like culture and earth. And this is obviously very different in the Western world, right?
Yes.
And I think in those cultures, for example, this is what you're saying, like this is their life's work, or at least this is who they are. So. And for us, I mean, like myself, I do an education, to start working with this. But I also see this as two separate things. I have to say, like, I'm not a medicine woman, or not in that way. But I think we as Westerners have our own perspective on things, and it's not necessarily right or wrong. I think it's just. I think in general, let's say, well, at least if people working with people, or with plants, or I think what at least for me is a very important thing is like we all have the common wish to make people connect to themselves again and to their inner healer, and like what is your form or way that's different. But it's a very delicate topic in terms of psychedelics, because obviously there's a whole tradition, surrounding the psychedelics. So it's like, it's also something that for me, it's like I stick to what I do, and like the form that I do it in, without, talking about like, indigenous practices for myself, let's say.
Yeah.
So I bring my own practice alongside with it.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, and what you're doing effectively is you are connecting people with themselves.
Yeah, and this is also my deeper purpose in life. So I think, maybe like in another lifetime I was...
quite possibly.
A medicine woman somewhere. No, but I mean...
Maybe that's why it resonated with you in this lifetime.
Yeah, it could be. But I mean, it's more that there's a lot of controversial... I think topics surrounding, people saying like Western world robbed like the indigenous practices. But I think I see it more as like if you really stay authentic to yourself, to what you can bring, I think, there's not really like a right or wrong way in doing something, unless... Plus, you stay with, like, for me, the more concerned thing would be, like, as a Westerner, I would all of a sudden say, like, oh, I'm a medicine woman, and I'm, like, I have all the wisdom of these practices.
Like appropriation. Cultural appropriation.
Yeah, and I think this is, like, something that I stay away from, like, for me, it's...
I hear you. But I think a lot of Western civilization was built on
as well.
So I'm so interested in the Eleusinian mysteries, because they're totally mysteries. Like we're really guessing, because it was this festival. I'm sure you've heard of these through your studies, but maybe peripherally.
Yeah.
But they were doing these festivals that were like basically like Burning Man. Really, it seems like that every year or twice a year. And for 2,000 years, like every fall, anybody who was like anybody would go. Like Plato was there, all of, like Marcus Aurelius, like all of the Greek philosophers, and they would drink a substance, which there are great reasons to think that it's fungal.
Yeah.
You know, one theory is that it, you know, the barley had this sort of smut that was growing on it that produced this like psilocybin, like hallucinogenic fungus. Or there was like an acronym for the ingredients to this drink, and they spelled out mica, like the root word for mycelium.
Yeah.
So, but what effectively they were experiencing was, one reason they would go was like it was your initiation to like become a human, to die before you died, so you weren't scared of death. You went one time in your whole life, so you had to like, you could only go once, and you could never talk about what happened there. So because it's shrouded in mystery, I'm like so obsessed with it. But it makes so much sense what they were doing, and the idea for cities and like, you know, like systems, all the things that built Western society actually came out of those visions and those philosophers who really, you know, created culture. So we always think that like so much information is derivative, but I think it all is coming from a source, and we're just getting tap-ins to it.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also some, apparently they were using a lot of this in ancient Rome, but it was, so whether it be through psychedelics or through other initiatory practices, like one of the reasons why I really also love hypnosis is because they were using it in ancient Egypt as like in healing, and like they were using these sleep chambers, and all of these sort of altered states gave this inner experience, right? And they regarded like the students of these mystery schools as initiates, right? So this concept of initiation, which we've just totally taken out of society, like religion, like the Catholic Church was like, that's heresy. And then science was like, we don't study quantum science. We just study like the last bit, which is the material. So we've been kind of starved of this right to grow up and initiate ourselves in the inner experience of being human. So I find this renaissance of the psychedelics so interesting and therapeutic in that it brings us just back to ourselves.
Yeah, that's it, actually. Yeah, that's how I see it. And this can be, there can be so many layers to it, right? Because it's like sometimes people experience a session and it's not like, it's not fun. It's not like, oh, I'm back to myself and I feel myself. It can be like very confusing. But I always say that in the end, it makes sense. Even during a session, it's intense, but like in the end, it always makes sense. And people always know like, okay, this is what I should have experienced in a way.
Right.
Yeah. And because I really notice with people like, that's why I say like in terms of like a magic pill, it's not always I mean, in the end, it's always a beautiful experience, but I mean, it can be a tough experience, right?
Sure.
It can be an intense one. It can be confusing. It can be confronting. But I think in the end, it always makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially as you do the process with an integration afterwards, because you find the meaning in it versus just had this really weird experience. And I, you
Definitely.
know, and you kind of push it off, right? Because that's an easy thing to do, especially because as we're talking about, like these sort of experiences aren't really integrated collectively in society. No. There's not, I mean, it is happening more with like the work you're doing, which is why I think this is so amazing, the work you're doing, and it's so important. And I think that it's just at the beginning.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Yeah. It's like definitely in the beginning. So there's like, I think, but it's exactly what you're saying. I think our society is not like, let's say our society. I mean, we live in Europe, right? So, I'm just speaking
modern
from
society.
Modern society. Yeah, I think is not really. you know, we don't really get the time to integrate or like to, you know, like, so I always, first of all, I always tell people like, okay, you take the day off in the day itself, but please take the day off the next day. And really, you know, because and I think this is so important, like where and what kind of messages do I get like in those moments of silence, of nothing, like afterwards of self-care, you know, it's like a popular word, but like the things that connect me to myself. It's not just a session, it's actually afterwards, and then connect to the meaning. And I think this is something that I think there, you know, starts to change slowly, in a way that people are start to live more, I hope, in a more like calm way, let's say. It doesn't mean calm, doesn't mean you cannot be literally active or doing a lot, but like conscious, maybe that's a better word.
Yeah.
Because I think that all of us have like an overstimulated nervous system, which also happens because we get like bombarded with information constantly, right? You really have to be disciplined yourself to like switch off the, you know,
especially now.
Yeah. So I think this is such an important part, is like taking the time to. Well, I mean, now we're talking about psychedelics, but I think it's every experience, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know, we don't even take time. I mean, in the Netherlands, we don't even get time to, after giving birth, you have like 3 months off as a woman, so you don't really
2 weeks.
Or 2 no, in the US, it's like, oh man, it's terrible. But like,
you're like back at work 2 weeks later,
and like this is also an initiation of, you know, of becoming, you know, a mother or whatever. Like it's and then you get like these time frames, and even a father, like fathers, or you know. They also, like in the Netherlands, they got 2 days off or whatever, not even. And I think this starts to change, but I think it's far from what we need maybe as a human being.
But it's an important step towards like, back towards like, what is it? What is the experience of being human? Like, what is the inner world? What are we, you know, like, what is this, what are we doing here, right?
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can live your whole life just trying to, like, survive, pay your bills, go to work, you know. In the US, I think more so. It's like, you know, I'm planning my trip back in July. And I was just like, I wonder how many conversations I'm going to sit down and hear about people and, like, their health insurance premiums and their, you know, like, it's always, like, it's trying to stay on top of the organization and, like, very little time to take time and explore your inner world. And it's just, in some cases, it's just not a priority. And I think that as we collectively start to reprioritize that, and I think the psychedelic, the renaissance of this is such a big part of it. And then meeting that with the conditions that are becoming more common, like you talked about, like the overstimulation of the nervous system. But I think depression and anxiety are just on the rise. And I believe that psilocybin is very helpful for depression. Is that?
Yeah. No, definitely. It's like the major research, what they are doing is on depression. Now they're moving towards other things, even physical conditions like multiple sclerosis, or even cluster headaches, like things that are because
with psilocybin.
With psilocybin, because so they started with depression and they got like really amazing results. But actually now they're seeing more benefit, like for different kinds of conditions or like diagnoses, like be it physical or mental. So So for depression, it really works well, and MDMA for PTSD. But I think psilocybin, MDMA as well, but like psilocybin is something, as it connects you to your. Also where they use it for is addiction. So it's not well known because it's not well known, but I mean now they're using it for addiction. Okay. And actually the founder of the AA, he used LSD for alcohol abuse, but then obviously it got like.
He left that out of his 12 steps.
Yes, because it got like.
I remember Gabor Mate was talking about that. Very interesting.
Obviously, because the war on drugs and everything. So, but actually, for addiction, it really works well because you also go like, I mean, an addiction is a symptom, right, of something. On something deeper,
often based on trauma.
Exactly. So I think what like psilocybin or LSD or the psychedelics that they use for alcohol abuse or like any addiction is actually because you go to the root cause and that's where like the healing lies. It's not about like treating the symptoms. Let's say. I mean, maybe you have to start with like obviously
there might be that period.
But then and this is so I think for a lot of different conditions and even for like physical conditions they start to.
I didn't realize that with physical conditions.
Well, that's amazing because it's like, for example, with a neurodegenerative disease like MS, like what they see now is that. I mean, this is still very in the beginning, but what they see is that because obviously it works on your neuroplasticity, so the flexibility of the brain, that it could also, in a way, benefit like some symptoms of MS. It doesn't
make sense,
cure, but like with Parkinson even, like it could maybe benefit because it also is with dopamine and
so neurological.
Yeah. So,
and I think that mind body are so inextricably connected anyway.
Yeah.
And a lot of our brain chemistry gets created by, the thought and the emotion and the biochemistry and then the frequency and vibration that you put out through that. And then that can manifest as energy somewhere.
Exactly. It's like the body, like the book, The Body Keeps a Score, right?
Yeah.
I think
it's a great book.
Yeah. Plus like the overstimulation of our nervous system obviously also can create a disease, literally a disease because and then it manifests and it's stuck somewhere and then so I think there's a lot of promising results and but then again it's obviously not. It's not like, this is the cure. This is
but it's a paradigm shift, which I think is important.
And
it's
I think
that's a completely different way of looking at things. I mean, I don't know how it is in Europe, but I know in the U.S., like the use of antidepressants and a lot of these SSRIs is very, very, very common. And I don't know, and I think that more and more sort of information has come out that they're not so helpful or useful. And I actually know quite a few people who have had severe depression and then, had a psilocybin experience or two and really did solve it. And the same with addiction. Actually, I've heard that from people as well. The first time I came to Portugal, it was the second time I came once in college, but I came here for San Pedro ceremony. And I'd gone to meet this woman who was like, she's like a shaman, a psychotherapist, and an energy healer. I was like, oh,
wow,
all in one. This will save me money.
Exactly.
So I went to go see her.
I want to get her number.
She was so cool. It was when I was living in London, and she was like in her 70s. She was an American lady, and she was married to an Ayahuasquero from Peru. Who was like he'd spent years living in the jungle learning the medicine. And then he also was like one of the archaeologists for Machu Picchu.
Wow.
So they had this really cool trip that you could go on with them. They took you in places that you couldn't go in Peru. You did a couple ayahuasca ceremonies, a couple San Pedro ceremonies, and you were with them, right? So I was like, okay, I'm really interested in this. So I went to go see her, all thinking I was called for the ayahuasca. And she was just like, I don't think so yet. And, she was, she wasn't she had, she was from Berkeley. So she used to do LSD with Steve Jobs and then ended up in Peru a long time ago, before this was popular. So sorry, I just heard a weird ringing.
Oh.
Is everything okay? Yeah. Oh. Sorry, I thought I heard a sound coming out of the microphone.
It's the ayahuasca coming.
Yeah, I was also thinking it's calling
I was
you.
like, oh my God, that's it. I was actually a ringing.
Really?
Is that the ayahuasca calling?
Oh, right.
Interesting. Weird.
Yeah, I didn't hear it.
Interesting. So,
It's an LSD flashback.
yeah, maybe I was having a flashback. That's so funny. But no, she was so cool. But she was just like, yeah, no. But we're going to do this San Pedro thing in Portugal. So she kind of described ayahuasca as like, she was like, not yet. She wasn't like, no. But she was just like, you might want to try this first. This has the energy of like a kind, loving grandfather. I was like,
Yeah.
that sounds good versus whatever, whatever she was saying I shouldn't do. She's like, this one's more of like a headmistress. I was like, oh, there's already a mean lady living in my head. I've got enough of that. Let's go with the kind loving grandfather. And I went and I met these group of guys. And it's funny as you do a ceremony like this, I don't know if you experienced this, if you did it with other people, it's almost like the stuff starts working on the group before anybody even takes anything. So
Definitely.
like, I can't remember, there was probably a group of 10 of us, and I can't remember that many of the people that were there, but a friend and I went together and we met these 3 guys right away. They were like our friends, like right off the bat. We all, like when we were doing the ceremony, like we were thinking about each other, like they were having visions of us and we were having visions of them. We all started talking, and one of them was this guy. Anyway, it turns out he eventually went on to be one of the early founders of Compass Pathways.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he was
Wow.
there doing research.
Wow.
So it was just such an interesting experience and understanding of like how he was going to use it and what was happening with the research. And this was only like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just think about how far things came.
Yeah.
But my experience with the San Pedro was very, very gentle. It was almost sub-perceptual, but it was informational. So I got some very symbolic information, but it was the integration afterwards. And I can see that it shifted my paradigm. And I didn't realize it until a few years, maybe 2 years later. I was like, when did I start seeing things this way? And it's almost like the neural pathways and the consciousness got moved around. And I do relate it back to that period because I'm like, I don't know why I can now see things this way, but it was not about specific information, but it was more of a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And I think that's happening with so many people.
Yeah.
And it's happening on like a group level.
Yeah.
And
No, I agree. And I also think sometimes it's so subtle.
yes.
Exactly what you're saying. Like, wait, I maybe only after 2 years or whatever, like you notice like, when did this happen? Like, how did I like change? So, like for me, for example, what I notice myself is I all of a sudden realized like, how did I become nicer to myself? Like something like that. And this for me is very much related to, I think it's very much related to like the work that you do in yourself in general, right? Because it's like, I also truly believe that you cannot do everything at the same time, or you cannot break through all your layers in one go. But like since I do sometimes like I do psilocybin sessions myself, like twice a year or something, always with someone, I started noticing that I became nicer to myself, I think. Yeah. And probably that's also a big thing for me. But it was not something that happened overnight, or that I thought like, today I'm super nice to myself. But it was just in small things.
Yeah.
And I think this subtle change, if you don't have like, because I think for a lot of people, we all want to have like, we want to have a big, big change or something that I can, like, let's say in our world, like we want to be able to measure it, right? Like there's a before and an after, and now so this is obviously like the rational brain, like, okay, how can I measure it? But I always tell my clients, like, it's just really focus on the subtle things, like. And this will come if you are open to it and it can be even like years later or half a year later or, and I think this is really important because it's also the impatience of the world we're living in, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
I mean, we want something today, we buy it, and it's there tomorrow. I think the impatience, is one of the big things that are blocking us from, connecting to ourselves and also noticing small changes.
Right.
I think we want to move too fast always, and I think we optimize. And I think also like working with these altered states, like either if it's hypnosis or psychedelics, I think. But I think also just working on yourself, therapy. What kind of therapy? Somatic, talk therapy. I think it's just also a moment of slowing down and just paying attention to yourself and what you're feeling and what and how you're moving and navigating through the world. And I think it's just the slowing down actually that we all have a hard. Well, at least I think in general we all have a hard time. Doing.
And bringing attention inwards because, like we were talking about the overstimulated nervous system, a lot of it's because our attention is just constantly being focused and refocused. I don't know how many friends of mine have recently, it's like, I've just been diagnosed with ADD. I've just been diagnosed with adult ADHD. And it's like, no shit. We all have it. But it's becoming more and more prevalent. So I think, kind of like the need for this type of therapy that really brings you inward is becoming more and more important and like just more of a useful tool.
I always tell my clients as well, like, okay, I don't think you've ever laid down on a couch or a bed for 6 hours with your phone switched off. Yeah, okay, when you're sick, but you don't have your, like, as a kid maybe, but like, and you don't have to do anything or have to be anywhere, just here, right? So I said, like, regardless, like, of everything, if you don't have any, like, sort of outcome or you don't feel, I think...
Even that? Yeah.
Disconnected to the outside world, someone that takes care of you is already, like, a win, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a similar experience with my hypnosis clients. I was working with somebody yesterday, and he was just like, "This state just feels so nice." I was like, "Well, the theta state, before I even do anything, just that state is healing because you're in a healing state. Like your body can actually start to like relax, and it's regenerative to all the processes in the body. So." Actually don't even need to do anything, but like you're already like regenerating by being in the state. And you probably, we get into the hypnotic, the theta brainwave state, like before we go to sleep and as we before we go to sleep and as we wake up, but we're not really using it. We're not really like relishing in it. Especially for like checking emails or something before we go to sleep. Which I do sometimes, even though I know better. So I shouldn't do that.
Leave your phone outside of your bed.
Yes. I put it on airplane mode. But I like to know it's there.
Yeah. That's already, isn't it?
I know. Yeah. Oh, well, we talked about how this is the beginning of psilocybin and psychedelic-assisted therapy. What is the future? No, that's too big of a question. What is next for you, Emma?
Yeah, thank you. It's a nice question. Yeah, so what I actually realized this week when I was doing a session with a client, I realized like, okay, I wanna move a bit into the one-on-one sessions, yes, but also like more group sessions.
Oh, interesting.
And then also bringing in different kinds of work. So more the somatic work, breath work, maybe more energy work. So people get like, they get like a few days of connecting to themselves on different kinds of levels. And I also really want to teach other psychologists or like people, therapists, psychologists, about this work. And I really feel that for me, that's something that I want to move into. And I really, in the end, I see this as something, that I hopefully that it becomes more accessible to more people, like to everyone, because until now it's quite an exclusive thing in a way, because it's like also, it costs money. It's like, it's not reimbursed by health insurance, for example. So I hope, at least in the Netherlands, because there I'm licensed as a psychologist, and my clients get one-on-one, like the talk therapy, they get reimbursed by the health insurance. But I really, really hope at some point this becomes something that health insurance sees as a real important therapy. And I think they have to, because they already know it's so profound. So yeah, for me, I hope I can, in the end, I can work with a lot of people that wanna experience this, and not just the people that can pay it.
Yeah, and I think probably the group work makes it more accessible to people.
Yeah.
And how would you deliver that? Like in a retreat format?
Yeah, in a retreat format.
Count me in.
Yeah, I would definitely still do preparation and integration. So, but this is more one-on-one then. But like the sessions itself would be more in a group retreat.
I'd love to do that. Would you do it here in Portugal?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
That's my idea.
I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, this is for me. This is something that I'm and I would love to be more involved in teaching and maybe research in a way. But yeah, so let's see.
Yes, because I think the world needs more people who understand it the way that you do and can deliver that integration for people to connect with themselves.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
Yeah, I have a website.
Okay.
It's emmaharmsen.com. So it's my first and my last name.
I will list that in the notes.
And I have an Instagram page, which is not super active, but I'm working on it, which is also Emma Harmsen. So it's my name. And you can, like, when you're on my website, there are a lot of options to just book a discovery call, and then we can just chat for half an hour, and I can explain some things, and you can ask me questions, and so
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. It was so interesting, and just such a topic that I could just talk to you for hours about. But we will end here, and thank you so much for this today. This was really fun.